As a young player at Celtic, we were made to become runners at the coaching courses, and the runners meant that you had to go down in the summer and you became the guinea pigs for the coaches. And I used to go down, I had a couple of summers down there, and I loved it. I loved being around football people. I had a couple of weeks of being a midfield player, a right back, a centre forward, and you were learning all the jobs. You were learning twin striker play, you were learning overlapping full-backs, you were learning midfield support play. All these parts of the game I got very young. So when I reached about 20, 21, I decided to start my C licence in Scotland. Then I done my B licence, then I done my A licence, and I was a fully qualified coach in Scotland by the time I was, I think, 21, 22. By that time I had left Celtic and moved to England, and I was a bit worried that the Scottish coaching course might not be seen as well as maybe the English one. So I then got myself into the English one, and I went through the whole process again and done it all in England. So I don't know if there's many actually done their full coaching badges twice, but I certainly am one of them. I loved being around football people, and I have to tell you this about the SFA and the coaching courses in Scotland. Great managers gave up their time to come down and try and make me a coach or make other people coaches as well. And there's so much I wanted to learn at the time, and how they picked their teams, and just when they picked their teams, what was their team talks like. There was so many questions as a young coach I wanted to ask, and nowadays I'm the one who's trying to give that information back to the young coaches. The biggest mentor to me was Walter Smith. Andy Roxburgh and Walter Smith had been my Scottish youth team managers. Walter Smith, as everybody knows, went on to be incredibly successful at Glasgow Rangers. They managed Everton, Scotland at different times. So I always felt that I could phone Walter up. As I got a little bit older and into my journey of coaching, Sir Alex was someone who I would phone up with. I was getting offered an awful lot of jobs in my early days. As not long after I took the jobs at Preston, I was getting offered a lot of jobs, and I used to say, who am I going to phone? Who am I going to ask for advice? My dad was great. My dad was a football man, and I could go and ask football questions all the time. But in truth, when it got to the stage of knowing the professional game, the clubs, the understanding of how the clubs ran, there was only one or two people who I felt could give me advice, who could maybe just help steer me in one way or the other. Well, I had gone to Preston later near the end of my career, and I wasn't quite sure, where I was going. But I did know that I'd like to get into football coaching, but there's no guarantee. I wasn't necessarily a big name player, even though I had, throughout my career, I'd probably ended up with nearly 600 appearances as a player. And I had played in nearly all the leagues, which I've got to say I think was a help to me as well. When I did take the job at Preston, I never really wanted the job because I was a player. I had a player's contract. I was saying, do I want to give this up? What if I'm not wanted? And in truth, the Preston public, they wanted Joe Royle or Ian Rush as manager. They didn't want David Moyes as manager, because this was the thing. They wanted someone with a big name, someone who was sort of more exciting. So fortunate the chairman gave me the opportunity. I didn't take the job right away. I said I'd do it as a sort of caretaker job at the time. 5 or 6 games, I was player manager, played a couple of games, played terribly. We didn't really win. Took myself out the team and concentrated totally on the management. And from that point, I eventually took the job, and it went from strength to strength, really. I think when you get the job as a coach, if you think that I'm going to stick my feet under the table and sit at the desk and that's you, then, well, it's the last thing and the worst thing you can do. You have to be out there, you have to be looking, you have to be learning, you have to be improving, because if you don't, everybody else will do. So at that time, I was looking around to try and find where could I get information, where could I go? And we went to the World Cup. And I wrote to all the countries to see if I could come and watch the training. And at that time, I get no reply. The only country who replied to me was Scotland. Craig Brown was the manager now of Scotland. Craig Brown was the only guy who invited me to come and watch training. So I went and sat in Avignon, watched Scotland training. And to be fair, I have to say the PFA helped me greatly, because at that time we weren't earning a lot of money. So the PFA helped fund me to get to France to watch the training and to tour around. Got me some tickets for the games, and I went to Montpellier, went to all round the south of France watching the games and also watching Scotland training. I was trying to see what the good players were doing, what the good behaviour of these players are, how they're practising, when they're practising. I don't think I was actually seeing anything which was anything absolutely new. But the job as a coach is to go out and find something, or hear something, or understand something. And sometimes you can have practical sessions, sometimes it's classroom sessions which you pick it up in. But at that time I was out trying to get as much knowledge and understanding of dealing with players and the coaching and the understanding as what I could. I was brought up in the days with Celtic, and Celtic could never do anything else but attacking. The job was you had to attack, you had to play attacking football. It's what the crowd demanded, but you also had to play good football. So I think that was the way I believe I was brought up, and to integrate that into Preston, the players wanted the change. No, it wasn't of the possession we see maybe in today's modern football, but it was certainly of getting crosses in the box and the ball into the striker's feet. All those things were the things that we were working at regular. I believe we lost to Tony Pulis' Gillingham in the playoffs, and it was really disappointing because momentum's a big thing in football, and also getting the time to do the job, which is something which nowadays we're not seeing as much. But the momentum, I had started to get some momentum from avoiding relegation, from then growing in the league. And what happens is the players begin to believe in you as well. And the board are suddenly saying, hey, this is going in the right direction, we're winning. Everybody wants to win. Winning's the biggest thing. We can have all the different styles and philosophies you want, but if you win, then that gives you the biggest platform then to get time to go in the direction you want. I was beginning to get that. But unfortunately, the loss at Gillingham was devastating, because it was really the first real hiccup I had had since I had taken the job. We believed, and I'm going to say I expected. I've expected all my players. Whenever I play, I've expected all the players, because the work we do, the preparation, but mainly the work I would do on the training ground, that it would pay off eventually in the games. And I think all the players I've worked with I hope would probably say that. It wasn't a case of, we weren't high-fiving ourselves every time we won the games. I was more saying, no, well, that's what you do. You're paid to do it. That's the way we work. Your job's to win. Everton was the right job. There was a director at Blackpool Football Club, and because I used to go and watch so much football, I used to go to the games, and I'd come to Blackpool quite regular to see them playing. I remember this, and he was an old Scottish guy. He said to me, there's only one club for you, son, and it's Everton. And I sort of nodded my head and went away and didn't really think much of it. But it stuck with me, and it proved to be right. I did have other offers before I chose Everton. I'd met Southampton, I'd met Nottingham Forest, but to name those ones, there was others as well at the time who were interesting. I had met Sheffield Wednesday, and I thought, oh, should I, shouldn't I? And I remember I phoned Sir Alex up and I said, could I see him? And he says, yeah, and actually it was the new Carrington at the time. So I went to his office in Carrington, which ultimately became my office in years to come. And I sat there and I spoke to him about Sheffield Wednesday. And Sir Alex was so knowledgeable. He went through all the squad, all the players, went through them all, and said to me, no, David, I don't think it's that good a job. I went, fine. And that was it. I went away back to Preston. I don't think MD can quite understand, and if you're a young coach, the difference in the change to suddenly that trying to prepare for a Premier League game to where I had been and working with the players. And I had been a player at Preston, I had been a coach, I'd been assistant manager, I'd been manager, and now I was going somewhere new. And I found that in the first day I was walking into a dressing room which had Paul Gascoigne, David Ginola, Duncan Ferguson, Tommy Gravison. It was full of international players. And I don't think all the coaching badges you do and all the practice gets you ready and prepared for that moment, really. And I think that's a different part of being a coach and a manager, that, you know, how you deal with it, how you handle it, how you gain respect. I think you have to earn respect. I don't think you can be given it. I think you have to earn it. I think the way you earn it is by coaching, by showing you've got good knowledge of what you're talking about. You can put practices on what the players believe are correct, are good. It can't all be jolly, but it has to be towards the game. And I think that's what I was always working towards in a way. But I think also you have to show that you're the boss as well when it comes to it. There was great players in the dressing room. But I had made my mind up that I didn't necessarily want players at the end of their career who are coming maybe for the last year or two, good money, top money, with no resale value and no longevity. My plan was to get a young, exciting, hungry players, and I knew I couldn't do it overnight, but the knowledge I'd brought from the Championship meant that I knew that there was 3 or 4 players in that league which I thought were hungry and could step up. Bringing Tim Cahill to the club set a different type of standard, because I believe that he came with a hunger, determination, a toughness, also an ego. It was myself and the chairman, Bill Kenwright. I said to him, I'd like you to come to see Millwall in Birmingham. It's in the playoff games in the Championship. And you have to remember, Millwall had a really good team, but Tim Cahill was the one I wanted to go and see. And I said, when we went, and I remember we drove in Bill's old Jag, and the car was getting battered on the way into Millwall. We were battering it, and I'm thinking, what have I done here? We invited Tim later to come and speak to us. Bill thought he was a great character, which I didn't know. And it's something which, for managers, is very difficult to find out about players' characters. You try to meet them, you try to find out a bit about them. But I've got to say, we signed a brilliant character. My first year we done well at Everton, second year we didn't, third year better, fourth year not so good. That's the process it takes. And I nearly feel, I hope this interview goes out to some of the owners. And I hope a lot of the owners are watching, because I would say it took time to change what was there. Time to change contracts round, time to move people on, time for people naturally to maybe grow a little bit older and have to change club. And for also the time to get the players in, because you can't bring them in all the time. So I think the coaches, we all understand that. The problem is getting the owners to understand that, or the CEOs to understand that. But what I will say, if you look at our success at Everton, over the piece we were finishing in the top 7, 8, 6, 5, and eventually 4 over a long period of time. And I think that came from stability at the club, getting to know how the club works and getting to know the theme of the club. And I think to change football clubs round is not something you can do very quickly. It takes a long time to do that. But I hope that we kept a lot of the real values at Everton, what the supporters wanted, what they needed, but we were also trying to take it into a modern culture, modern players, modern style. And if you look at their success, I think at Everton it was remarkable what we achieved in the time with what we had. We were always pushing, and actually my last 2 years at Everton saw us finish above Liverpool in the league, which at that time, when you look back now at where it is, as you would say, well, it's a remarkable achievement to finish. And Everton really hadn't had a great history of finishing above Liverpool in the league, maybe only once or twice in the last 20 years. So for us to do it twice before I left was a really big achievement. We were improving. We had a very, very good team. for coaches getting to the first point of, say, getting 2 years in football now. I hear a lot saying, well, if you have a good style and a good philosophy, I'd say no. If you have a good winning record, you'll get 2 years. If you can actually keep that up, you might get 5 years. And I hope that some get to 10 years. I think we're seeing less and less of it in football. And I hope it's not, because my time at 11 years at Everton certainly was one of the longest. If you look back at British football, you look at the real dynasties in football. So you look at Nottingham Forest, Brian Clough, Sir Bobby Robson at Ipswich, Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, the length of period he was there. So I actually think those clubs in the main have all had a high level of success through their time. But I have to say, unfortunately, we're in a completely different era, a modern era where actually changing your manager quite regular is in fashion. And I think if you are a coach coming into the world today, I think you have to come in with not a long-term vision, a short-term view, and then a mid to short-term view of what you can do to win games, get results, get people believing that you are the right man for the job. I do believe you should have a philosophy in how you play, how you get those results, the way your club runs. I think you should have an influence on if you can. You've got to hope that you have good owners and good directors who are going to allow you to do that. So the job at Manchester United came right out of the blue. But I have to say, in my last year or two at Everton, I had been getting approached by many big clubs. I have to say nearly the majority of the big clubs in England had all at some time made contact with me. And it wasn't anything which I was really that interested in. Also, I have to say, a big Spanish team as well had contacted me. But I'd always said I would stay with Everton, I would see out my contract, or I would be continuing. But out the blue, Manchester United came for me. And if you look at Manchester United's history of selecting managers would tend to be, well, really in my time it'd only been Sir Alex, but Sir Alex had been really successful at Aberdeen, but you wouldn't have said that Sir Alex was the biggest name out there. And I think Manchester United followed a pattern of picking what they thought was the right fit for their club. You know, person who they saw as the right way to go. There was they had real good values, Manchester United. I think when I was chosen, I think I fitted the values that Manchester United had. Young players, hard-working, determination, but also being able to coach and take and work with players. And I think that's what Manchester United, and I believe that was the reason why Manchester United chose me. Their idea for managers, you'd have to say, has been to have a long-term project, because that is the way that club has tended to work. And when I joined, I went in there with a long contract, with the thoughts that this would be the next long stage of my career. And Manchester United were one of the last clubs to have those values. I think we'd seen regular changes at other clubs in the UK. It wasn't something which had been done at Manchester United. So I think in many ways their values had changed by that. But ultimately, if you're going to manage the top clubs, you have to win. And really, it's my philosophy. I didn't win often enough, and I totally understand that. I've always wanted to work abroad. I've always wanted the opportunity. And in truth, Germany would have been my first choice. I liked the way German football was organised, the sort of professionalism. When I went to the games, the stadiums were full, the training grounds were at the stadium. I liked a lot of the stuff what the Germans had done. But the Spain job came up and I was a little bit worried. I said, my goodness, this could be a different type of player. How am I going to deal with it? And I wasn't quite sure how it would be, but I've got to say, it was a brilliant experience. Real Sociedad was a great club with their great philosophy, which was you were only allowed 6 players from anywhere else except the academy. And they had to have come through the academy to be in the first team squad. So what it meant was something I found really difficult, to start with. But as I grew on and had been there a year, I understood their values, what it stood for. They have a great academy. So if you're a talented footballer at Real Sociedad, you will always stay in the Real Sociedad academy with a great chance of playing in the first team, because you've had to come through the ranks. And we'll look at what we've got now in the UK, for example, with the teams, and we've got so many talented young English players about who are struggling to get games at their club. That isn't the situation in Real Sociedad. They play their players, they keep them there. If not, they put them to another club, but always keep hold of them. It might stop Real Sociedad ever becoming one of the top teams in Spain because of it, but I've got to say I really value, and probably even more so appreciate their what they stand for and how it worked. I learnt lots about football, I learnt lots about myself. I learnt about the cultural differences. In the word culture covers so many aspects that, probably in this short interview we're having, I couldn't give it all out. But I think culturally you have to really immerse yourself in it. The language is something which I've got to say was probably my biggest disappointment, that I couldn't learn to speak Spanish. But it wasn't for the want of trying. It's an experience that we need to get more British managers into doing. At the moment, we can't get any British managers to get the jobs in the big leagues in Europe, which you would class as Spain, Germany, Italy, France. We've got very few British managers who are getting the opportunities to get jobs in those countries. We are very good at the moment of importing the best coaches and the best managers from other countries. Fortunately enough, I was one of the ones who got the opportunity to go and work in Spain. But now on the Scottish Pro licence, all the coaches have to do one of their sessions in a different language. And this is to show the coaches that we have to be more open, we have to learn languages, you have to be able to do Italian or Spanish or German, whatever you choose to do, you have to do one session in a foreign language. And that was since I came back from Spain. I thought that us British coaches have to be better in another language, and I don't know if the coaches will be thanking me for it now, but that's part of the pro licence in Scotland now. We've seen lots and lots of changes in the tactical and technical side of football at the moment. I do a lot of work for UEFA and have done, and been on their observers for over the last few years about what are the new trends, what's developing in football. And, for example, we only need to look at the difference in goalkeepers now. And I have to say, when a little bit of this talk came in 5 years ago about the goalkeepers using the ball a bit better, the answer was always, just save it, just catch it, do the right things. Now, ultimately for me, that is the rule. Your goalkeeper has to stop the ball going in the net and has to help you out. But because of where the game is now, they have to be much better with their feet. So I think the coaching and training of goalkeepers will ultimately be one of the big changes which is happening and is happening in football because of the development. Now from young levels, the goalkeepers are getting taught in showing the use of their feet, probably joining in possession games with the team, joining in much more of the daily training than maybe what they have done in the past. And it mustn't take away their what they're there for, as I've said. But I think their use of the ball and being comfortable on the ball means that they have to be a footballer as well as a goalkeeper nowadays. Well, there's much more flexibility in all teams now. It's much more difficult now to necessarily say, are they playing with a back four, a back five, because teams are capable now of quite simply playing with a back four, but one full-back goes on, another one might stay. We're seeing sometimes where both full-backs go on and a midfield player will drop in. We're seeing teams play with five at the back, or three at the back, and one of the central defenders taking the ball into the midfield. We're seeing lots of three midfield players, sometimes one holding, two advanced, sometimes two holding, one advanced. Sometimes it's in a sort of zigzag way, 1, 2, 3, in different ways. So I think now the flexibility in coaching and management has become much greater than ever been. I think what we're seeing less of is two strikers. I think we're seeing less and less in football of, say, twin strikers, where strikers would play together. And you go back to the great Manchester United teams who would have two strikers, Sheringham and Cole. I think we're developing strikers who play on their own. I don't think we're coaching and working partnerships necessarily in that position. I think we're also, for a long period, been looking at a different version of wingers, wide players. For many years at Everton, I said I played with false wingers, which I did do. We quite often in the early days, midway through, we had people like Mikel Arteta and Leon Osman would play off the sides, but really played as tucked in midfield players or in behind the striker when we had the ball. So we used to play with what we called false wingers, which at that time allowed us to have the likes of Leighton Baines or Seamus Coleman or Tony Hibbett attacking fullbacks. But I see now the wide players may play in a front three. So sometimes those front three are strikers, sometimes they're wingers. We have Manchester City who might play with two out-and-out wide players, but we see Liverpool who might play with old-fashioned inside forwards in Salah and Mane. So I think the systems are very flexible. I think how you work them's different for lots of teams. So I think there's an incredible change in football in many, many different ways, but for the good. But what we don't want is football played the same way by every team, because for me, if it's doing that, then we're going to be bored. So we have to encourage different styles, different managers. And if we're continually critical of managers who play maybe not the perfect style, then we will find that we have a game of chess, which eventually, for us all who are really keen to watch games, we don't. We want to see something different.